Hello. Our EU-funded Gearing project has the objective of challenging and transforming gender roles and identities linked to professional careers and working towards real institutional change. So why is understanding issues related to gender, diversity and pay an important element of this work? Across the world, women are underrepresented in the labour market. In 2020, 67% of women aged 20 to 64 were in employment, compared to 78% of men among the EU 27. Furthermore, if women are increasingly likely to be employed, they are less likely to achieve higher status roles, what is called vertical segregation, or to work in sectors dominated by men, that is, horizontal segregation. Segregation matters because it is a strong driver of pay inequalities between women and men. The sectors in which women are overrepresented, such as nursing or teaching, tend to be undervalued and receive lower pay. Even within the same sector, women get paid less overall because they are less likely to work in the highest positions. The pay gap currently stands at 14% in the EU 27, with slow progress in closing the gap over time. But what exactly do we mean by the gender pay gap? This is not the same as equal pay, which focuses on ensuring that women and men are paid the same for the same work or work of the same value. The gender pay gap is the difference in the hourly pay of all women and all men in an organisation, expressed as a percentage of men's hourly pay. However, the use of hourly pay underestimates the gender gap in earnings. Since women are more likely to work part-time or work fewer hours throughout the year, the gender gap in monthly or annual pay is in fact much wider. Also, the gender pay gap, as the name implies, only captures pay. This ignores other aspects of income such as bonuses, which further widen the gap between women and men's overall income. Women's lower income is not without consequences. The pay gap has important knock-on effects as it translates into a gender gap in savings, investments and pensions. In fact, the gender gap in pensions in the EU amounted to 29% in 2019 in the EU 27, demonstrating the importance of considering how inequalities add up over a lifetime. One of the biggest contributors to the gender pay gap is the differing consequences of becoming a parent for women and men. Around the world, inequalities in terms of earnings and occupational progression persist for women due to childbirth and bearing the majority of childcare and associated domestic work thereafter. In contrast, men's careers tend not to be affected by having children. In fact, some studies find that men's income and hours in work increase when they have children, what is referred to as the fatherhood premium. Data on the UK, for example, shows that the pay gap between women and men widens in the years after parents have their first child. A study by the UK Institute for Fiscal Studies found the gap to be around 10% before the birth of the first child and around 30% by the time the child reaches the age of 13. Part, but not all, of the explanation is that mothers are less likely to work full-time. This suggests it is becoming a mother, rather than gender per se, that creates most of the pay disadvantage. But even women who do not have children suffer from the motherhood penalty. The potential for women to have children can feed into perceptions of all women as risky workers, even those who cannot or do not want to become mothers, thus constraining women's career choices. Thinking about what is valued in the workplace also gives some insight into the causes of the gender pay gap. Most workplaces are organised as if paid work is the only, or at least the primary, responsibility of employees. White-collar workers, especially managers and professionals, are expected to work long hours, arrange their outside responsibilities around their paid work, and be willing to relocate or travel as requested. They are thus expected to live up to the expectations of what has been called the ideal worker. This sort of organisational culture reinforces gender inequalities in the workplace, given that women and men have different cultural expectations when it comes to engaging in responsibilities at home. Women, and mothers in particular, find it harder to live up to these expectations and are therefore less likely to reap the economic rewards associated with being measured up to the ideal worker expectations. Typical ideal worker attributes also tend to be those associated with men, such as confidence and authority, meaning that women who do succeed in living up to these expectations can be penalised for transgressing gender norms, a catch-22 situation. There is also an ethnicity pay gap which is becoming increasingly acknowledged. In the UK, for example, work by the Fawcett Society taking a more intersectional approach has shown that women of colour are not only hugely underrepresented in management and senior leadership positions, but that they consistently earn less than white British men. For example, analysis by Woodhams et al. In 2013 shows the effect of multiple discrimination on pay in a large UK company. While the pay gap between white-abled men and women aged 31 to 45 was 9%, this increased to 13% when compared to women of the same age from an ethnic minority, and 32% for women from an ethnic minority who were over 46 and had a disability. So what can we do about the gender pay gap? Countries in Europe have responded in different ways. The EU Commission proposes measures to ensure equal pay for equal work, such as pay transparency and better access to justice for victims of pay discrimination. In the UK, mandatory gender pay gap reporting was introduced in 2018, which requires employers with more than 250 staff to publish their gender pay gap figures annually. Other countries have gone further. For example, since 2020, companies with more than 25 employees in Iceland must prove that they are paying men and women equally through a job evaluation tool called the Equal Wage Management Standard. These initiatives are recent, however, and it will be some time before we see whether they can challenge the long-standing structures which maintain the pay gap and entrench gender differences. Thank you very much for listening.